Aldi broke every rule American grocery retail said was permanent. It entered the most competitive food market on earth with smaller stores, fewer products, no name brands, and prices so low that established chains initially assumed it was a temporary novelty that would correct itself when the economics caught up. The economics never caught up because Aldi built a different set of economics entirely, and the grocery chains that dismissed it spent the next 4 decades watching it take their customers one shopping trip at a time. Aldi is now expanding faster than any grocery chain in America, and the decisions driving that expansion are ones no American grocer was willing to make first. What Aldi actually is, most Americans have this wrong. Aldi began in Germany in 1913. Anna Albrecht opened a small store in Essen with her husband. Her sons, Karl and Theo, inherited it after World War II and built it methodically into a regional chain through discipline and repetition. Then, in 1960, they had an argument. The disagreement was about one product, whether to sell cigarettes behind the counter. That single dispute over a single product category split the company permanently into 2 entirely separate businesses that have never reunited. Aldi Nord and Aldi Süd divided Germany between them along a geographic line and went their separate ways. The Aldi operating in the United States is Aldi Süd. Trader Joe's, which is something most Americans who love that store have never been told, is owned by Aldi Nord. 2 companies from the same family operating under entirely different names, competing in the same country, and most of their combined customers have no idea any of this history exists. Aldi Süd entered the United States in 1976. The first American store opened in Iowa. The model it imported had been refined through decades of German operation and was not designed to compete with American grocery chains on their own terms. It was specifically designed to make American grocery chain economics look wasteful by comparison, which is a different strategic orientation entirely and a far more durable one. You do not win by playing your competitor's game better. You win by making their game look expensive while yours looks free. The structure most shoppers never fully grasp is that Aldi is entirely privately held. There are no shareholders demanding quarterly growth metrics at earnings calls. There are no analysts pressing management on margin expansion timelines. There is no stock price creating pressure to optimize the next 90 days at the expense of the next 10 years. The Albrecht family retained full ownership through the corporate split and through every decade of expansion that followed. That ownership structure is not incidental to how Aldi operates. It is the foundational explanation for why the model has stayed intact and coherent while publicly traded competitors have been pulled simultaneously in 17 directions by shareholder expectations that change with every earnings cycle. Aldi now operates over 2,300 stores across 38 American states. It serves millions of households every week. It generates revenues that would place it among the significant players in American food retail if it were required to disclose them, which as a private company, it is not. The scale is enormous. The invisibility it maintains relative to that scale is not an accident. It is, in its own way, a competitive asset. The private label dominance, 90%, is the number that explains everything else. Approximately 90% of products in any Aldi store carry an Aldi house brand rather than a national brand name you would recognize from television. That percentage is not the outcome of failing to attract national brands to the shelf. Aldi has not been rejected by Kraft or Procter & Gamble. The 90% is a deliberate architecture built around a specific and precise insight about where grocery retail margin actually goes and who is capturing it. National brands charge a premium that covers their marketing budgets, their slotting fees paid to retailers for shelf placement, their trade promotion programs, and their shareholder return requirements. Aldi decided that none of those costs needed to be embedded in the grocery transaction and built a supply chain specifically engineered to remove all of them simultaneously. The private label model at Aldi operates differently from private label at any conventional chain. At a traditional supermarket, the store brand is a secondary option positioned below the national brand on the shelf, designed to offer price-sensitive shoppers an alternative, while the national brand anchors the category and collects the margin the retailer negotiated for giving it prominent placement. At Aldi, the private label is the category. There is no national brand anchor. There is no comparison product on the adjacent shelf quietly reminding the shopper of what they are sacrificing. The Aldi product is simply the product. Its quality has to stand on its own merits rather than being evaluated in the comfortable shadow of an established name and a 60-second television commercial. That structure creates a fundamentally different incentive for product development than anything a conventional chain's private label program produces. Aldi cannot hide a mediocre product behind a nationally advertised brand because there is no nationally advertised brand available to hide behind. Every product on every shelf carries Aldi's implicit full endorsement. If the product is bad, the store is bad. That direct alignment between product quality and store reputation produces a development discipline that national brand private label programs at conventional chains rarely replicate with equal intensity, because the stakes for each individual item failing are not as immediately visible in a store that also sells 50 national brands in the same category. The cost implications of operating at 90% private label compound across every single category in the store. No slotting fees paid to place national brands onto shelves, no trade promotion budget managed through complex supplier relationships, no category management sophistication required to manage multiple competing national brands within the same product segment. The supply chain runs directly from manufacturer to store with fewer intermediary steps than any conventional grocery chain operates anywhere in the country. The savings that result are not captured as additional margin for the business. They are transferred to the shopper as lower prices, which drives the traffic that justifies the model, which funds the scale that enables the supplier relationships, which maintains the prices. The loop is self-reinforcing and has been running for nearly 50 years. Aldi's private label quality has been validated externally and repeatedly enough that the validation is no longer surprising to anyone paying attention. Product comparison studies, blind consumer taste tests, and industry award programs have consistently found Aldi house brand products competitive with or superior to national brand equivalents across categories including dairy, snacks, produce, frozen food, and wine. The medals are real. The quality is not accidental. It is the direct result of specifications-based sourcing from manufacturers who also produce for national brands and who meet Aldi's documented and enforced quality benchmarks rather than simply meeting a cost target. The store design is the strategy. Small stores are not a limitation. They are the architecture. A standard Aldi store runs approximately 12,000 square feet. A conventional supermarket runs 50,000 to 80,000 square feet. A Walmart supercenter runs over 170,000. Every square foot of retail space costs money to build, to heat and cool, to staff, to insure, and to maintain. Aldi made the decision that a grocery store does not need to be large. It needs to be efficient. The resulting footprint is roughly 1/5 the size of a conventional supermarket and contains everything a household needs for its weekly staples. There is no service deli counter. There is no in-store bakery. There is no fish counter with staff standing behind glass. There is no floral department, no prepared food section, no staffed customer service desk in the conventional sense. Every one of those omissions represents a cost that Aldi has decided the shopper does not need to pay for embedded in the price of their groceries. The shopper who specifically wants a quarter pound of sliced turkey from a staffed deli counter is shopping at the wrong store. Aldi has made peace with that reality and priced its model for the much larger group of shoppers who did not need the deli counter anyway. Products arrive on pallets and are sold directly from the shipping box. The cardboard display is the shelf. This eliminates the labor of unpacking, shelving, and facing product that conventional grocery stores perform constantly throughout the operating day. One employee can manage an Aldi product category in the time it takes a conventional grocery employee to face a single product in a multi-brand category. The labor math compounds across every category in the store and produces a staffing model that runs with significantly fewer employees per dollar of revenue than any traditional supermarket format. The checkout model has been a point of shopper adjustment since Aldi entered the American market. Shoppers bag their own groceries. They use a quarter deposit system for carts rather than employing cart attendants. The cashier works at a pace calibrated for speed rather than conversation. None of these elements are accidental friction. They are engineered cost removals that the shopper participates in completing, and the price difference visible on the receipt is the direct return on that participation. Once shoppers understand the exchange they are making, most of them make it willingly and repeatedly. The wage move. Nobody expected Aldi pays well. That sentence is genuinely strange to write about a deep discount grocery chain. Discount retail in America has a long and documented history of wage compression, justified by thin margins and intense competition, a logic that produces low wages, high turnover, inconsistent service, and the perpetual cost of replacing workers who left for something better the moment something better appeared. Aldi operates inside that exact competitive environment and has consistently paid wages that exceed the industry average. The company has publicly committed to minimum starting wages that meaningfully exceed the federal minimum and has raised those floors ahead of regulatory requirements rather than in reluctant response to them. The logic underneath is counterintuitive on the surface and becomes straightforward once the staffing model is visible. Aldi locations operate with very few employees relative to the volume they process. A typical Aldi store runs with a fraction of the headcount a conventional supermarket of comparable revenue requires. With fewer total employees, the cost of paying each one significantly more is smaller as a share of total labor expense than the same wage increase would be in a high headcount format. The math that makes above-market wages unaffordable at a conventional supermarket makes them affordable at Aldi because the denominator is fundamentally different, and the return on paying more is direct and measurable. Employee turnover in retail is expensive in ways that do not always appear on the line where labor costs are tracked. Recruiting costs, training time, onboarding friction, and the operational inconsistency of a workforce in constant rotation accumulate across every departure. A workforce paid above market, given predictable scheduling, and treated as a genuine operational asset stays longer, produces better outcomes, and costs less to maintain over a full year than a workforce paid at market that churns at retail industry average rates. Aldi has been recognized in employee satisfaction surveys and employer reputation rankings consistently enough that the recognition has become part of the brand's talent acquisition infrastructure. Being known as a good employer in a labor market where retail competes against warehouse logistics and service sector. Alternatives generates applicant quality advantages that compound into store operational quality in ways that no individual price tag or product specification can replicate. The customer encountering a competent, stable, well-trained Aldi employee is having an experience shaped by a compensation decision made at the corporate level that is invisible on the price tag but present in every transaction. The wage strategy only holds because the staffing efficiency the format creates makes it economically viable. A conventional supermarket cannot simply raise all employee wages without a corresponding revenue increase or margin sacrifice. It employs too many people relative to its volume for that math to close. Aldi's format generates the staffing efficiency that makes the wages affordable and the retention economics that make them valuable. The two elements reinforce each other continuously and cannot be separated without undermining both: the produce and fresh expansion. Fresh food was supposed to be the limit. The conventional wisdom about deep discount grocery retail held that fresh produce, quality meat, and genuine dairy could not be delivered at discount price points without compromising on the freshness and quality that make those categories worth buying. The model worked for shelf-stable goods. The thinking went because shelf-stable goods could be sourced, shipped, and stored on timelines that supported the cost structure. Fresh food operated on different timelines and different supply chain requirements that the discount model could not accommodate without the quality degrading to the point where the category became a liability. Aldi has spent the last decade systematically proving that conventional wisdom wrong. The fresh produce investment has been one of the most significant strategic bets in the company's American expansion, requiring supply chain development, supplier relationships, and cold chain infrastructure investment that the original discount model did not include. The results have been visible and measurable. Aldi produce sections have expanded in size, variety, and quality across its store network. Consumer surveys on fresh produce satisfaction at Aldi have improved materially over the period of investment. The mechanism behind the fresh success is the same mechanism behind the private label success. Direct supplier relationships with specifications-based sourcing that removes intermediary cost and aligns supplier incentives with quality delivery rather than price alone. Aldi's produce buyers work directly with growers on seasonal sourcing programs that give the grower volume certainty in exchange for price and quality commitments. The model is common in premium grocery retail. Applying it at Aldi's price points required a supply chain discipline and a willingness to accept thinner margins on fresh categories that the overall store economics support, even when individual category margins are compressed. The fresh expansion has also been a direct response to competitive pressure from conventional grocery chains that had identified fresh food quality as the primary point of differentiation against discount formats. If Aldi's fresh categories are genuinely competitive, the argument that shoppers need to visit a conventional chain for quality fresh food loses its force. And when that argument loses its force, the trip to the conventional chain loses a significant portion of its justification. Aldi's fresh investment is not simply about adding categories, it is about removing the reason to shop anywhere else for a complete weekly grocery run. The SNAP and food access angle. Aldi accepts SNAP benefits. That is not unusual among grocery retailers. What is unusual is the combination of SNAP acceptance, genuine price leadership, and store format characteristics that make Aldi accessible to households navigating tight grocery budgets in ways that other formats claiming to serve value shoppers often do not. A SNAP household shopping at a conventional supermarket with national brand product architecture pays prices that reflect national brand marketing costs, whether they want to or not. A SNAP household at Aldi pays prices that reflect the removal of those costs. The difference on a weekly grocery run is not trivial. Research on grocery access and food desert geography has consistently found that price is one of the most significant barriers to nutritious food consumption in lower income households. The household that knows fresh produce is healthier and wants to buy it but cannot make the budget work is not making a preference decision. It is making a constraint decision. Aldi's price structure reduces that constraint more directly than most conventional grocery formats operating in the same income segments. The store format may require behavioral adjustment from shoppers accustomed to full-service environments. The price difference is immediate and does not require adjustment. Aldi's store locations have increasingly included lower-income urban and suburban markets where food access has historically been limited and where conventional grocery investment has been insufficient relative to population and need. The smaller footprint and lower construction cost of an Aldi store make markets viable that a conventional supermarket format cannot profitably enter at equivalent price points. Where a 50,000 square foot supermarket cannot make the unit economics work, in a lower income urban neighborhood, a 12,000 square foot Aldi sometimes can. The format efficiency is not just a cost advantage in affluent markets, it is an access enabler in underserved ones. The honest caveat is that Aldi's expansion decisions are driven by commercial viability rather than food access mission. The company is not a social enterprise. It opens stores where the business case supports opening them. The alignment between Aldi's commercial model and improved food access in underserved markets is real and meaningful. It is also a byproduct of commercial logic rather than a primary driver of location decisions. Both things can be true, and understanding which is which matters for evaluating what Aldi will do when commercial viability and food access point in different directions. The fearsome expansion plan Aldi is building fast. The company announced plans to reach approximately 3,000 stores in the United States, which would represent an addition of several hundred locations from its current base and would push it into markets and communities where it currently has limited or no presence. The expansion timeline is aggressive relative to the pace conventional grocery chains have been able to sustain and is backed by capital commitments that reflect the confidence of a privately held company, not subject to quarterly pressure to moderate investment for earnings management purposes. The markets being entered in the expansion wave include suburban and exurban areas where conventional grocery competition is significant, but where Aldi's price leadership gives it a durable entry argument, regardless of the competitive density. Aldi does not need to be the only grocery option in a market to win customers from the options already there. It needs to be cheap enough, close enough, and good enough that a meaningful share of the existing grocery shoppers in that market find the trip worthwhile. At its current quality and price levels, that threshold is lower than it has ever been in Aldi's American history. The competitive impact on existing grocery chains in markets Aldi enters has been documented and is significant. Studies examining grocery pricing in markets before and after Aldi entry have found meaningful price reductions by incumbent chains, particularly in the categories where Aldi's private label alternatives most directly compete. The chains that do not reduce prices lose share. The chains that reduce prices to compete sacrifice margin. Either outcome benefits the shopper and disadvantages the incumbent. Aldi creates competitive pressure without engaging in a conventional competitive response because conventional competitive responses assume a competitive format that Aldi does not operate. Regional chains are the most vulnerable to the expansion. A regional supermarket chain operating in markets that Aldi is entering faces a competitor with lower cost structure, stronger private label development, better wage retention, and a parent company with the capital and patience to sustain investment through competitive friction without the quarterly pressure a regional chain's ownership structure typically creates. The regional chain's advantages are local knowledge, full-service format, and established customer relationships. As Aldi's fresh categories improve and its store experience becomes more familiar to shoppers who initially found it unfamiliar, the local knowledge and established relationship advantages narrow. The format and cost structure advantages do not. The quality perception problem. Cheap used to mean bad. In American grocery retail, that association was deeply embedded, and it did not apply only to Aldi. Any product without a recognized national brand name was assumed to be inferior until proven otherwise, and the proof required significant time and repeated positive experience to accumulate. Aldi entered the American market carrying that assumption and spent decades systematically dismantling it, category by category, through product quality that the assumption said should not have been possible at the price. The awards began accumulating. Aldi products have won medals in international wine competitions, received recognition in consumer product comparison studies, and earned positive coverage in food media that previously would not have considered a discount grocery chain's private label products worth evaluating seriously. The coverage changed the conversation. Shoppers who had never entered an Aldi began entering one on the strength of a specific product recommendation from a credible source. Many of them stayed for the prices. The quality brought them in. The economics kept them coming back. The approach Aldi used to close the quality gap was not complicated. It was disciplined and sustained. Aldi's product specifications for private label manufacturers are detailed and enforced. Suppliers who fail to meet quality benchmarks lose the contract. The consequence structure for quality failure is real, which makes quality delivery a genuine priority for manufacturers rather than a negotiated compromise. National brand manufacturers who also produce Aldi private label products under contract have repeatedly stated that Aldi's quality requirements are as demanding as those of the branded product lines they operate alongside them. The perception gap has narrowed substantially, but has not disappeared entirely. Shoppers who have never tried an Aldi product still carry assumptions that shoppers with Aldi experience have largely abandoned. New markets Aldi enters encounter the original skepticism that established markets have moved past. The quality story has to be told again in each new geography through actual product experience rather than reputation alone, because reputation travels more slowly than store openings. This is the one area where Aldi's lack of national brand anchors and limited above-the-line advertising investment creates a genuine friction in customer acquisition that the business model does not automatically resolve. Whether any of it works, honest assessment requires this. Aldi's structural advantages are real and durable in ways that most retail competitive advantages are not. The private label architecture, the small footprint efficiency, the wage retention model, and the private ownership insulation from quarterly pressure are not features that a competitor can copy in a single strategic planning cycle. They are embedded in the design of the business at a level that would require rebuilding the business to replicate. That is a genuine and significant moat. The primary vulnerability is the fresh food investment. Fresh categories require supply chain discipline, supplier relationship management, and quality control infrastructure that the original Aldi model was not built around. As fresh expands as a share of the Aldi assortment, the complexity of the operation increases in ways that the lean staffing model has to absorb. A fresh produce failure in a given store on a given day is a more damaging customer experience than a shelf-stable product being temporarily out of stock. The tolerance for fresh quality variation that shoppers extend to a premium grocer does not automatically extend to a discount grocer, and the management infrastructure required to minimize that variation is more expensive and more complicated than managing shelf-stable inventory. Aldi also faces a shopper comfort challenge in demographics that have grown up in full-service grocery environments and that find the bring-your-own-bag, pack-your-own-groceries, cart deposit format genuinely alienating rather than simply unfamiliar. These shoppers exist in significant numbers in the suburban and exurban markets Aldi is targeting in the current expansion. They represent real potential customers who are currently choosing not to become Aldi customers on the basis of format preference rather than price or quality. Converting them requires either format evolution that risks the cost efficiency that makes the model work, or a price differential large enough to overcome the format discomfort. In an inflationary environment, the price differential has been doing that work. In a more stable pricing environment, the format friction may reassert itself. The competition is watching and responding. Walmart has invested heavily in private label quality and expansion. Target's Good and Gather private label brand has moved meaningfully upmarket in quality and presentation. Conventional chains are reducing their national brand assortment and expanding their own label programs in direct response to Aldi's demonstrated consumer willingness to accept private label across more categories than traditional grocery wisdom assumed. The private label advantage Aldi built is being competed against more aggressively than at any previous point in its American history. The head start is substantial. The gap is narrowing. Here is what Aldi's story is actually about. Every decision Aldi made that American grocery retail insisted could not work was fundamentally a decision about where grocery costs originate and which of those costs the shopper is actually required to pay. National brand marketing budgets, service counter staffing, expansive store footprints requiring armies of employees to maintain, complex multi-brand category management, cart attendants, baggers, slotting fees, trade promotion programs, all of those cost money. American grocery retail decided collectively that those costs were fixed and permanent features of what a grocery store is, and passed every one of them to shoppers invisibly embedded in the price of every item on every shelf. Aldi decided they were optional, built a store that operated without them, and transferred the savings directly to the people buying the groceries. The decisions that appeared strange when Aldi opened in Iowa in 1976, the stripped-down stores, the house brands, the self-bagging, the cart deposit, have each proven durable across nearly 5 decades, not because American shoppers eventually lowered their standards and accepted them, but because each one was actually correct. Each reflected a genuine and accurate insight about what a grocery store needs to contain and what it does not. American retail spent decades operating on the assumption that more service, more brands, more square footage, and more staff were what shoppers wanted and what competitive advantage required. Aldi built a different assumption into poured concrete in Iowa and watched it work for 50 years. The chains that dismissed Aldi in the 1970s and 80s as a European budget experiment unsuited to American consumer preferences are still writing explanations for why their margins are compressing and their traffic is declining in markets where Aldi has been open for years. The explanation is not complicated. Aldi did what no American grocery store was willing to do first. It decided that the shopper's money mattered more than the industry's inherited assumptions about what a grocery store was supposed to look like, feel like, and cost to operate. That decision was made in Germany in 1960 and has been executed without deviation every single day since. The American grocery industry is still processing the implications. Aldi is still opening stores.